Today's story will make us rethink everything we know about rivers. We're usually taught that rivers are born in high places, flow through the land, and eventually end up in another body of water, like a lake, sea, or ocean. That's how our planet works. Water runs from the mountains to the sea, evaporates, forms clouds, and returns to the water cycle. It's a closed loop. But with the Colorado River, a crucial link in this chain has disappeared over the past 20 years. What could possibly be powerful enough to stop a river that supports 40 million people and generates $1.4 trillion every year? And what will America do this time to save this river? Let's dive in. On the map of the United States, few rivers carry as much weight as the Colorado. At nearly 1,450 miles long, it's not the longest river, but it's the fifth most important artery in the country. All 7 of these states rely on the Colorado for drinking water, irrigation, hydropower, and recreation. In short, it's also home to fish and countless wildlife species. Everyone needs it. The Colorado starts in the Never Summer Mountains in Rocky Mountain National Park, at an elevation of over 10,000 feet above sea level. In winter, heavy snow blankets the towering peaks. In spring, as the ice melts, that snow slowly releases hundreds of thousands of gallons of fresh water. That's how the Colorado River is born. As it heads southwest, it gathers hundreds of tributaries, growing from a rushing stream into a mighty ribbon of water that carves through some of America's most iconic canyons before pouring into the Gulf of California. At least that's the journey it's taken for thousands of years. But not anymore. Scientists call this snowpack collapse, the breakdown of the snow layer that feeds the river. The Colorado has lost nearly a third of its strength right from its source. And because the Colorado is weakening at its very origin, the U.S. is starting to worry. The importance of this river goes far beyond ordinary numbers. The Colorado only accounts for 2% of America's total fresh water, but it has to support 40 million people, 12.3 million acres of farmland, and 7 states. That means a relatively small river is carrying the weight of a tenth of the population of the world's richest nation. If you're in Las Vegas, Phoenix, Denver, Los Angeles, or San Diego, every time you turn on the tap, you're almost certainly using water from the Colorado. Agriculture depends on it even more. Look at your winter dinner table. 90% of America's winter vegetables, from lettuce and kale to broccoli, are grown with Colorado River water. As one researcher at the Water Resources Institute put it, if the Colorado collapses, American supermarkets would be empty overnight. It's not just agriculture, our economy depends on it too. The entire Colorado River Basin contributes about $1.4 trillion a year. If it were an independent country, its economy would rank in the top 7 globally, on par with Japan or France. Now imagine such a nation losing 19% of its flow in just a few decades. And forecasts show that by 2100, the decline could reach 55%. So what or who is powerful enough to drain a river that carved the Grand Canyon in just a few decades? The answer isn't simple. We have a list of suspects, but to accuse anyone, we need evidence. Since 1935, the Hoover Dam has blocked the Colorado, creating Lake Mead, the largest man-made reservoir in the U.S. 30 years later, Glen Canyon Dam locked up the upper river, forming Lake Powell. In total, about 15 major dams have been built directly on the river, not to mention hundreds of smaller ones on its tributaries. One expert from the Bureau of Reclamation once admitted, "No river in North America is as controlled as the Colorado. These projects provide electricity, water, and growth for millions, but for the river, they're like shackles locking up its natural flow. When water is trapped in reservoirs, the surface area increases many times over. And in the dry West, that means massive evaporation. It's estimated that every year, 10% of the Colorado's water disappears into the air or seeps into the ground through open channels. In 2018, Blue Mesa Reservoir dropped below 1/3 of its capacity, exposing the foundations of a town that had been submerged since 1966. A shocking sight for Americans. The second suspect is a century-old, outdated agreement. In 1922, 7 basin states signed the Colorado River Compact, dividing water based on the average flow of an unusually wet year. They believed the climate would always be stable. They were wrong. Over the next 100 years, everything changed. 3 more big dams were built. The basin's population grew 9-fold, farming expanded, and energy demands soared. The region slipped into permanent drought, a new normal of desertification. Less rain, hotter temperatures, earlier snowmelt. The Colorado is running dry, but on paper, nearly 5 trillion gallons are still being divided up each year, even though the river now produces only about 4 trillion gallons. Then comes the third suspect, the Central Arizona Project, CAP, an engineering marvel, but a direct hit to the lower river. CAP is a 335-mile canal system that lifts water from the Colorado up to 3,000 feet, using 14 giant pumping stations, then sends it to Phoenix, Tucson, and dry farmland. This system moves 119 billion gallons a year, irrigates over 1 million acres, and helped Arizona nearly double its population in just 30 years. But CAP-He takes water without giving anything back. The water is drawn deep inland from the Colorado, leaving the river weaker and weaker as it approaches Mexico. With just these 3 suspects, the river barely reaches Mexico. So do you think it can still make it to the sea? Sadly, the list of suspects isn't over. As scientists dug deeper, they found even more, sometimes accidental, culprits. First up, wetlands. An ecosystem that seems tiny, only 1.5% of the Colorado's area, but is home to 90% of the river's fish and wildlife. Wetlands act like giant sponges, soaking up rain, holding floodwater, and slowing the flow. Between 1780 and 1980, the Colorado lost 50% of its natural wetlands. The rest, unintentionally, holds back up to a fifth of the river's water, making the already dry lower basin even more desperate. As one hydrology expert put it, wetlands don't kill rivers. They just help nature work right. But the problem is, the river is now too weak to handle any more resistance. Then comes our biggest suspect, agriculture and water rights. This is the culprit most people never see coming. Nearly 79% of Colorado's water is used for agriculture, mainly to grow alfalfa and hay, not vegetables for people. Take this example. Saudi Arabia banned growing alfalfa at home because it uses too much water. But they need it, so they bought land in Arizona, pumped Colorado water to grow it, and shipped the hay back to the Middle East for cattle feed. In Imperial Valley, which holds some of the biggest water rights in American history, just a few farming families can use more water than the entire city of Las Vegas. It gets even crazier when you realize it takes 450,000 gallons of water to grow 1 ton of hay, the same as what a typical American household uses in a whole year. And 1 pound of beef takes 1,800 gallons of water. Yet the use it or lose it law requires, if you don't use all your water allocation, you lose your rights. So hundreds of acres are flooded just so people don't lose their share. People are using more water than ever. It doesn't stop there. Wildfires have increased over the past decade, stripping mountainsides of shade, making snow melt faster, soil heat up, and causing the Colorado to lose billions more cubic feet of water each year. As one climate scientist bluntly put it, we're heating up the whole system from the roots up. So in the end, out of 100% of the river's water, how much actually reaches the delta? The answer? Almost zero. Where does it all go? A 2024 study using satellite data found that between 2000 and 2019, the main users of Colorado River water were agriculture, 52%, evaporation from natural vegetation, 19%, urban, commercial, industrial use, 18%, and evaporation from reservoirs, 11%. The Colorado is dying, and everything that depends on it is collapsing in a chain reaction. Let's start with the cities. Phoenix, the capital of a desert state, has had to consider an unbelievable option, buying water from Mexico, even proposing a 250-mile pipeline from the Gulf of California, a solution costing tens of billions of dollars. It sounds extreme, but Phoenix has no choice. Agriculture is taking an even bigger hit. Since the early 2000s, Arizona farmers knew water was running out. But by 2021, they were truly knocked down. Hundreds of fields, covering 254 acres, were abandoned. In 2022, the state cut 65% of Colorado River water to central Arizona farmers. The result? Half the irrigated land was left dry. Thousands of jobs disappeared. And a big chunk of the water-dependent economy was strangled. When the Colorado dies, its branches dry up too. Its three main tributaries, the Green, Gunnison, and San Juan rivers, have all seen their flows drop, triggering an ecological domino effect. Over 90% of mature forests and wetlands have vanished from the Mexican Delta. Native fish like the razorback sucker, bony-tailed chub, and humpback chub that lived here for thousands of years are now extinct. Underground, the consequences are even scarier. Some parts of Arizona are sinking permanently by 310 feet, as people overpump groundwater to make up for lost Colorado water. Once the land sinks, it never comes back. That means fertile valleys are being slowly crushed. Worst of all is the fate of Native American tribes and Mexican communities living in the Delta. Once, 5,000, 6,000 people lived off fish, boats, rituals, and rice paddies. Today, only about 400 remain in Mexico and 1,000 in the Yuma area. When the water disappears, the rituals vanish. The language disappears, and entire cultures are lost. The 1944 treaty gives Mexico 125 billion gallons of water a year. But native rights aren't even counted. They suffer the most, but get the least. And that's not all. Did you know the Salton Sea, California's largest lake, was almost entirely created by accident? In 1905, during a huge flood, the Colorado River burst through canal systems and poured into the Imperial Valley Desert. In less than 2 years, it created a massive lake over 350 square miles, a gift Americans thought was lucky. But they were wrong. Today, the Salton Sea isn't a lake, it's a dead sea. Water evaporates faster than it's replenished, leaving behind a toxic mix: salt, fertilizer, heavy metals, ammonia, arsenic. As the lake shrinks, toxic mud is exposed and blown straight into neighborhoods by the wind. Desert winds carry dust, as toxic as industrial waste, through communities of 650,000 people. It sticks to kids' lungs, homes, and schools. A 2022 study showed dust from the Salton Sea can damage lung tissue in just a few hours. These consequences are a wake-up call, forcing the U.S. to face the truth. If the Colorado dries up, the entire West will collapse with it. When scientists found that over 90% of forests and wetlands in the lower river had disappeared, places once full of fish, birds, and native cultures thousands of years old, the U.S. government immediately shifted from exploiting to saving the river. Since the early 2000s, ecologists have made a shocking discovery. Over 90% of forests and wetlands along the lower Colorado have vanished, taking with them entire ecosystems that supported hundreds of species. The once green delta is now just white sand, salty dust, and dead tree skeletons. In 2014, the U.S. carried out an unprecedented experiment, releasing an artificial flood from Glen Canyon Dam into Mexico. For the first time in nearly 50 years, the river got its natural flood pulse back. The water flowed for 8 weeks, peaking at 44,850 cubic feet per second, 3 to 4 times the normal flow, enough to move sediment, reopen old channels, and revive sandbars that had been choked for half a century. Scientists recorded that within just 48 hours, new sandbars began to form. Soil moisture jumped nearly 30%, and riverside plants thought to be dead suddenly sprouted again. Wildlife cameras showed native bird numbers rising in just a few weeks, and some freshwater fish returned to river sections they'd vanished from since the 1990s. That experiment paved the way for Raise the River, a coalition of nonprofits, Mexican groups, Cocopa, and Quechan tribes, and hundreds of volunteers. They replant riverside forests, restore green corridors, and track the return of migratory birds with camera traps. The results are amazing. 60% of bird species that had declined for 2 decades stopped dropping or even increased. White pelicans, green herons, and many migratory birds have started showing up again at new wetlands. But all these efforts are meaningless without one key factor that almost no popular source mentions: the Paria River, the real sand supplier for the Colorado. Just 95 miles long, the Paria brings 80–90% of the sediment that builds up Marble Canyon and the Grand Canyon. Without the Paria, the Colorado's bed is just bare gravel. Here's a little-known fact: every artificial flood from Glen Canyon Dam will fail if the Paria doesn't bring sediment at the right time. Thanks to precise timing between Paria sediment flows and artificial floods, young sandbars are now reappearing, the foundation for fish and bird breeding. New wetlands are attracting pelicans and snow geese, faint signals that the Colorado hasn't lost all hope yet. But time isn't on our side. The 2017 U.S.-Mexico agreement promises to keep releasing water through 2026. But the amount is only 1–2% of what the Delta got before the 1930s. Far too little for real recovery. With the Colorado declining faster than expected, 2023 became a historic moment. The three lower basin states, California, Arizona, and Nevada, were forced to sign an unprecedented deal, cutting about 13% of the water they take from Lake Mead and Lake Powell, nearly 1 trillion gallons over just 3 years. For many, that's just a number. But according to the U.S. Weather Service, 1 trillion gallons is enough to supply all of Los Angeles for nearly 5 years. This is no small effort. The urgency is clear. If cuts aren't made immediately, water levels in Mead and Powell will drop to dead pool, where hydropower turbines can't run. That means millions in Arizona, Nevada, and California could lose power entirely, suddenly, and irreversibly. The U.S. Department of the Interior warns, if Mead drops below 895 feet, the whole system will collapse. But such big changes are never easy. Farmers in the Imperial Valley, who hold the oldest water rights, call this deal a blow to the heart of American agriculture. In Arizona, many farms have lost 50–70% of their water, forcing thousands of acres to be abandoned. Fields that were once lush are now gray dust. Meanwhile, environmental experts say the deal is really just buying a few more years. A 2023 report from the University of Colorado Boulder confirms 1 trillion gallons is only about 3% of the long-term shortfall the basin faces by 2050. So, even though the deal is praised as a turning point, it's still just a temporary fix for a problem that's broken from the start. The scary truth is, water is disappearing faster than the government can sign new deals. So, what does the 2023 agreement really mean? 1. It keeps the reservoirs from hitting dead pool. 2. It proves that states who usually fight over every drop can work together when pushed to the wall. But most importantly, it shows that no one can wait any longer. The Colorado is out of time. After all the tense negotiations and cold numbers, the best solutions to save the Colorado don't come from billion-dollar mega projects, but from nature itself. Besides the artificial floods we mentioned, there are a few more methods. The first solution is raise the river, a movement to revive the delta by replanting riverside forests. When cottonwoods and willows are restored, they quickly form cool green corridors, enough to bring back 60% of native bird species. Not only do these forests provide shade and moisture, but they also cool the local climate and restart the food chain that's been broken for over half a century. But the most powerful natural engineers aren't humans. They're beavers. In Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado, beaver reintroduction projects are seeing amazing results. In just 2 years, one beaver group can build 10–20 small dams, holding back millions of gallons of water during dry seasons. University of Utah research confirms areas with beavers keep water 5–10 times longer than those without. These beaver dams create ponds, slow the flow, boost soil moisture, and can even save valleys on the brink of desertification. The next, and most controversial, solution is crop switching. Instead of growing alfalfa, which gulps 47–59 inches of water a year, many farmers are switching to agave, guayule, or switchgrass, plants that thrive on just 20% of the usual water. Guayule can even produce natural rubber, a sustainable material now being studied by NASA and the electric car industry. As one Arizona farmer put it, "I lose a little profit, but I buy myself 20 more years of water." The final solution relies entirely on natural science, managed aquifer recharge (MR), pumping water down into underground aquifers. Instead of storing water in reservoirs, where 10–12% evaporates each year, water is pushed deep underground, where up to 95% can be retained almost perfectly. In California's San Joaquin Valley, over 650,000 acre-feet of water have been stored in just 5 rainy seasons through Mar. Arizona and Nevada are now testing this model too. The future of the Colorado River hangs by a thread. If things keep going as they are, overuse, outdated water laws, rising temperatures, and shrinking reservoirs, the dead pool scenario will no longer be just a theory. Dead pool means water levels are too low for hydropower turbines to run, which means tens of millions lose electricity, cities lose water, and agriculture in Arizona, California, and Nevada collapses in a chain reaction. If bold changes are made, reasonable cuts, delta restoration, agricultural shifts, MEAR, beaver reintroduction, and expanding Raise the River, the Colorado could do something it hasn't in 60 years, reach the sea again. That would mean ecosystems reborn, birds returning, riverside forests thriving, and the native communities of Mexico seeing their ancestral river one more time, before it's too late. More importantly, millions of Americans would still have power, water, and a safer future. In the end, the story of the Colorado River isn't just about a disappearing stream. It's a warning for all humanity. When we over-control nature, nature will strike back in ways we never expected. So, do you think the Colorado should reach the sea again? What do you think is the strongest solution? Leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more strange stories that nature is quietly writing every day.